things the church can incorporate, or just things that have helped us through the years. May you just bless us now. Give us clarity of ear and heart this morning to accept what you have for us, and we'll praise your name for it. And we ask these things in your precious Son's name, Jesus Christ, for it is his name we pray. Amen. You can be seated there. Turn it right over to Brother Dwayne, and he can get started right away this morning.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sure.
Let me explain what is happening here. This is I was telling the church about the church was given two 70-inch TVs for free, and so what a blessing that is. So what we're trying to do is, like, when we do have special presentations like this, or we can put some words up there, different things, we'll be using those from time to time. Trying to figure out the programming and things like that, so that we can actually do it during services. We don't have to bring that down, and the person can maybe be speaking from the pulpit and have something on the screen as an illustration. So these are a blessing. They were free. Free is always a blessing. Amen. So we praise the Lord for that, and so we'll give it to Brother Dwayne. Hopefully, you're the first person to ever use it. Wow. And so if you break it, you bought it. And we checked on what the price of it is. So you said free. I can afford that.
By the way, you did hear him say that we got two for the church. I only see one around here, so we better check the pastor's.
We're testing them out in our offices, making sure.
Oh, okay, that's what. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I did hear him say two. Hey, some of you have asked about getting my outlines, and what I can do is I can give you just copies of the PowerPoints that I've done here. But I didn't want to make mass copies of it. Some of you say, well, I don't need that area, or I do need this area. So if there is a sign-up sheet back there, if there is a particular week that you want, or somebody signed up for all 4 weeks, that's fine. I'll be glad to give you copies. I have no problem with that. I just want you to make sure that you utilize them. I just don't want to waste the time and waste the copying. So I thought we'll go here and give a little bit of a quick review. And I say quick, I want to hit it and get into today's lesson. And then we are going to take one more week next week. The very first week, the foundation we laid, we want to really emphasize the world's philosophy versus the Word of God, and how we look at debt. For the world, it's all about your credit score and having the most of the better credit score and building up your credit. And the reason why is because they're all about debt. It's not necessarily, when you ask the question, can you afford it, they don't look in your budget. They just say, what is the monthly payment? That's why you got even these companies like Rent-A-Center and stuff like that. Instead of going in and buying the TV or buying the furniture, you rent it over time to buy it. And that's because in our society, we're so materialistic. We're so instant gratification. You got to have it today. It's not something that we're building up and working for. So we looked at the Word of God and what it says. And the Word of God says to owe no man anything but the love of God. And we see in Romans chapter 13. We see Proverbs 22 talks about the borrower is servant to the lender. And we get ourselves in financial bondage because of the debt, because of the weight of the finances and debt that God never intended us to be part of. And we looked at, and I'm just real quick, because I think it's so important to keep in your mind to get you mad at the devil for deceiving us, to his deception of this thing of debt and how we look at it. I just want to quickly hit what are some of the negative impacts we can look at and what we've been talking about with regard to debt. Quick. How's it? Steve? Stress, the emotional toll on us, having that weight of debt. I remember when, I had the student loans, the car loan, the mortgage, all those things. I can feel physically the weight, the stress that was put upon us. What's another one? Okay, rob Peter, pay Paul. You feel like you're juggling all these things, Again, that's emotional toll. Patty? Your relationships, okay? Talking about, Pastor was sharing with us, how the percentage, 75% he would estimate of his marital counseling centers on the issue of finances and money. It talks about even with regard to our children, perhaps we're not able to do things with them because we have to take that second job or work the overtime, and we don't have the option. So it hurts us emotionally, hurts us in our relationship. Obviously, it hurts us economically. We showed here in my example somebody paying $1,275 a month in just debt. You know, if you have all that debt paid, that's an extra $1,275 that you can be using for the Lord, to help others, to build up your nest egg. You know, that costs us economically, but we also see spiritually that a lot of times that we're not able to give, maybe for a special project, or give as the Lord lays upon our heart to give to somebody else, to be a blessing because of the debt that we have in our lives. So that's what we focused on week number 1. Week number 2, we said we got to have a plan. How is it that we're going to get a control of our finances so we can get out of debt? And what's the center thing that we talked about in week number 2? Starts with a B. Budgeting. That's right. That word that, you know, puts maybe the hair on our head to stand on end. You know, we don't like to talk about that, but that's the only way that we can get responsibility of that. Yvonne? Absolutely. That's another good thing. That's another negative impact that we have right there. Exactly. Absolutely. And so we see talking about budgeting, getting control of that, starting out with our income, then look at our expenditures. We gave you some guidelines, some percentages to see if you're out of one area, out of another, that maybe you're spending too much in this area, and we give you some guidelines to go by. And then week number 3 is we actually came up with the program of getting out of debt. And what do I call that? What's the name I used? Snowball effect. Okay, just going to start with that small bill. Okay, not worrying about the interest rate at this point. Focus on the small one. Get what we call the debt accelerator. Try to find an extra 10% of our budget to pay toward that small bill, and take the minimum payment that we're doing plus that mortgage or debt accelerator, pay into that till it's paid off, and then taking those two things, what we were paying on the first debt, taking that mortgage accelerator or debt accelerator, roll it into second, so that we keep on getting this snowball bigger. So by the time you're like to your mortgage, you're paying almost a double payment on that. And we can see with that plan that it can be within 6 to 7 years, you can be totally out of debt, including your mortgage. And then last week we started talking about, well, how can we find that 10% in our budget? How can we start saving money on our expenditures? And so that's where we looked at last week, and understanding some of the things that perhaps maybe you didn't even understand when you have a homeowner's policy. What am I actually buying? Do I have the right coverage? You know, replacement cost versus actual cash value cost. And a lot of people, it's not explained to them by their agents. You know, the liability. Looking at auto insurance last week. Again, get that outline if you didn't. Understanding what is it that I'm buying, and what is it that I'm paying for, and then we went down through that. So we're going to pick up this week and continue to try and to look at ways we can save money. One of the things that we're going to touch upon is, you know, talking about the utilities. You know, here in Pennsylvania, we have, not many other states do, we have the right to shop it out there for our energy supplier. So if you actually look at your energy bill, I'm out where I'm in the Penelec area. The Clarks are with me on that, out in our way. You have this bill, and you'll see all these breakdown costs over here. Now, we cannot go out and shop for who our distribution is, okay? We live up in that area toward Blairsville, Indiana, so the Clarks and I, we have to use Penelec. You can't shop around for that. But what you can shop around for is your energy supply company. And what you have to do, comparison shopping. Just like I told you last week, you take your deck page, blank it out, and then send it to 3 or 4 different agents. Here, what you're going to do is you're going to do comparison shop. This is an actual website you can go onto, PA Power Switch. And you can actually go out there and compete. So what you have to look at your bill is where it comes down to, and it says here the service information, okay? It looks at the actual billing supply. Like right now, I'm with AEP Energy. I didn't realize this. This was a good thing that helped me because usually Penelec has always been historically high, and so I've always gone out and shop. But when I was preparing this lesson, I looked over here, and I realized that Penelec is now lower than AEP. So this week I'll be changing. I didn't even realize that. I didn't look at my bill. But historically, Penelec has been high. But with AEP, I'm paying, here it is 0.0645. That means I'm paying approximately 6.5 cents per kilowatt. And Penelec right now, they give you a comparison over here. It's 5.36, okay, or just a little over 5.5 cents per kilowatt. But that's what you can do. And you know, they have on there, they'll try to get you to go with these companies that are green, that use only natural replenable resources, but on average, they're usually higher. But that's something you can do. One of the things I tell people is they'll have fixed and then they'll have variable rates, okay? It's okay to do a variable rate as long as you're not going to lock in for an extended period of time, no more than 6 months. You know, usually what they do is the same company, like AEP, they'll show a price that says, okay, fixed will give you 6.5%, but if you want a variable, we'll go with 6%, or 6 cents per kilowatt. That variable means that they can change it next month, and they can do that. So you're usually getting a lower rate, but there's that volatility. That's why I say never go with a variable rate unless you can get out of it in the next month or at the maximum 6 months. You know, sometimes you just want to go with a fixed rate, but at the same time, sometimes with a fixed rate, you're stuck there for a period of 1 year or more. You know, just again, just some of these things are common sense things. Some of these things just to remind you. We wrote down here, turn off the lights not in use. I'm known in the house as the Gestapo light guy. I did it one time. I told my kids, if you don't turn your lights off and I find that the light is on, you're not there, I'm taking out the light bulbs. And I did that. They've been in the dark for many years, you just turn off lights, just simple things. They're trying to save electricity, The other thing that's, popular now is the use energy-efficient LED bulbs. That's the reason why we no longer have the chandeliers here that were costing us. Do you have an estimate? Can you look at, think what we save by using the LED lights? Hey, and of course we use a lot more here, but just think in your own budget. The LED lights used to be very expensive, but they've now they're more efficient in their manufacturing, and so they are definitely more efficiency, but also last longer. Another thing you can do is actually get an electrical evaluation. They will actually, you can call up, Penelec does this, West Penn does this, and have an evaluation done of your electric usage. And one of the things I didn't realize, I have a finished basement, but it gets kind of damp, and I have a dehumidifier in there. And they were saying, that's like, my heat pumps up here, because out where I live, we don't even have any gas service, so I'm all electric in my house. So it's like the heat pump was right here, and then the dehumidifier is right below it. I didn't realize how much electric they use. And so they'll actually do that for free, do an evaluation of that. Kind of tied into this, another area is talking about gas. For those that have gas service, simply turning down your thermostat by 3 degrees. Instead of having it set on 72, to put it on 69 during the winter time can save you 10%. Something Bob and Jerry brought up to me I didn't think about is using a programmable thermostat. With a programmable thermostat, especially for those that if you both a husband and wife work, nobody's there during the day. You can have it programmed that, maybe instead of it being set on 68 or 69 like you do when you're there, have it set on 65. Why heat up the house more? And you can get these programmable ones at Lowe's fairly cheap. Kim?
But isn't it said before that by doing that you actually use more energy by turning it up and heating it up?
If you're going from extremes, like I'm not saying turn it off. If you're going from trying to heat a cold house to a hot house, that can take more energy. But I'm just talking about a few degrees. You go a few degrees, it can save you money, and it doesn't take that much for it to work to get back up. It's kind of like at my office. We have the gas steam heat. For me, it's like always. It's a challenge. How far can I get into the year before I have to turn on the gas heat? And I give my secretaries one lump of coal, to burn. They start calling me Ebenezer. Oh, what's wrong with that? The good of my heart, I give them a lump of coal. But it got kind of chilly this past week. But we do have kind of like space heaters out there, and I give them gloves. I pay them well. I don't know what the problem is. But, that's what this good weather, I haven't had to really turn on the gas furnace yet, and that's kind of an incentive. Some other things is, well, let me back up here, if I remember how to back up. I'll have to go off my notes and outlines here. Is look for drafts in windows and doors. Basically, you're looking for ways to keeping the cold air out. Add insulation to your home. You say, well, I already have maybe 6 inches of insulation. In my house, I remember when I built that back in '92, they were telling me you got to have like an R32 value. That's just a number they put out of what the insulation value will provide for you. My office again over there, when we bought that thing in '95, it was amazing to me. It was built somewhere around the 1890s. There is no insulation there was in that building. And she had an old coal furnace in that thing, and I swear she had to heat half a Latrobe just to keep that thing warm. I don't know how she did it. So, we did it in all this blown-in insulation and everything to try to keep the cost down. There's even weatherization companies, Westmoreland Weatherization. If you can't afford it, there's within your income, they have income requirements that they will actually provide certain weatherization windows. They'll provide insulation if you cannot afford that. So look into those things. I had here the telephone, talking about the home unit. Unless you absolutely need it, get rid of the home phone, just use the cell phones. Why do you have to have multiple coverages for that? If you do, combine it with the other services and internet and cable service when available. Talking about the cell phones. Cell phones, if you're going to get rid of the home phone, you're purchasing a cell phone. Just like I said about car insurance, cell phone is very competitive right now. And it used to be 5 years ago, maybe even 4 years ago, when you compared service, it wasn't even on the same extreme. Verizon had way more coverage than all the other ones, T-Mobile, Sprint. But right now, there is very limited difference. I have a secretary that has Cricket, and she has a camp down near the Yawk, and she says she has great service. She never loses a call. So there's not that much difference right now in the service providers as far as the service goes. It used to be a big difference. The two big names were Verizon and AT&T. They had the best coverage. But at this point, because they're using a lot of the same towers, there's very little drop-off in service. But yet there's a big difference in price. The Verizon just finally came up with unlimited data for a flat rate. And the only reason why they did that is because of the competition that they were getting from Sprint and from even AT&T. Be careful of purchasing a phone over time. You go in there and say, hey, I'm getting the new Apple 8. I think that comes out this week, doesn't it? Or, I should ask Keith. Keith knows all this stuff. Oh, okay. I didn't understand how the Apple 8's coming out this week, and then the Apple 10's supposed to be by the end of the year. Apple X. Hey. I know about Apple Jacks, though. If you want an Apple Jacks, I can tell you about that. I have the Droid here, so I don't know about that. But be careful. I mean, if you look at the cost of that, I remember when Mitchell got it, he got the Apple, and then it was like he was paying over 24 months, 2 years paying for this phone, and it was like an extra $31 a month. You don't necessarily have to have the latest and greatest. There's really, if you look at it, I was actually looking at it this week. My wife still has the Apple 6. And she goes, well, since I've had the Apple 6, there's been the Apple 6S, and there's been the Apple 7, and now there's the Apple 8. But there's really not that much difference at this point. There's nothing been new and great added to it. I have here compare plans and options to fit your needs versus wants. You look at some of the bills that I've seen before. Not only with the data, but even some of the extra features. People will sometimes have what they call the hotspot or this jetpack, and for their tablets and computers and all that stuff. Our car that we got out here, when we bought it, they said, oh, it comes with free Wi-Fi. And for 3 months, anytime my wife had to use her phone, I said, go out to sit in the car, use the Wi-Fi, it's free, it doesn't matter if it's cold out there. Go and sit in the garage and use that. But they're just another way of trying to get you to buy, and again, you have to look at that. Is that really a want versus need? With this car here, it has the Wi-Fi for 3 months. They get you kind of suckered into that, and then there's X amount of dollars you have to pay. And then they have the XM radio for free for so many months, and then you have to pay so much a month. It's just adding all these things. And again, you have to look at the want versus need. Most companies, I already talked about that, the service is very comparable. Some miscellaneous things, these are just, doesn't really fit one category. And I'm trying to find it, and if I can make a copy of it, I will. I got this thing from Consumer Report. It's a calendar, and it actually has on its side when to buy certain items. Like, the grill. You want a new grill? It's actually November and December is the best time to buy a grill. And you're getting things out of season. Of course, with clothes, we all know, hey, when's the best time to buy your summer clothes? July and August, because they're already into the fall stuff at that point. So you got to purchase those things out of season. The second thing I have under miscellaneous is, again, this is just a common sense thing, but you take care of what you have. Proper maintenance will make it last longer. Though I'm not to the extreme of my brother Melvin and how long he takes his vehicles, I do consider it a challenge. I like to see how many miles I can get on a vehicle. And we had that Buick Enclave, 160,000 miles on it. And, you just keep real good maintenance, of that. Make sure you're doing the oil filter change, air filter change, just proper maintenance on these things. Even things in your house, I must admit, I'm not as good at my office as in my house. One time I had to do a service call on the air conditioner, and the person showed me the air filter in the air conditioner at my office, and it was like caked with dirt. I'm thinking, there's an air filter in this thing. Oh, I didn't know that. I knew there was one at my house, but I didn't know there was one at my office. And, it can actually, it kind of blew up the condenser because the proper maintenance wasn't done. Air filters, something as simple as that in your, for those that have forced air, whether it be air conditioning or a heat pump or something, changing that air filter every 6 months. Usually, the way I remember it is, once I have to turn the heat on, then I'm changing the filter. Once I turn the air conditioner on, then I'm changing the filter. But you got something simple like that will keep the life of that piece of equipment for an extended period of time. Even simple things like carpet. You say, well, what's carpet? The Consumer Report did a study how that actually dirt breaks down the fibers. Something as simple as just making sure you're vacuuming your carpet once a week. Doing those things, maintaining those things are very important. It will make it last longer, and you won't have to have a turnover. Um, I asked a couple people, hey, if you have any ideas, and maybe you can even share them next week, ways to save money. We're always looking for that. If you want to do through, there's a couple people in our church that are super couponers. Mandy is one. You got to see her. If you ever see her store in her basement, I don't know how she does it. I had math and calculus, and I still don't understand how she does all that with the coupons. But she also has a store, by the way, if you want to take advantage of it, because she gets a lot of these products for free or very reduced cost. She turns around and sells them. So was it toothpaste and deodorant, toiletries, razors? See Mandy, she can get you cheap. I went to the store this week and got some toiletries, and you can save money that way. Anyone else that has any idea? Idea? Dave, Pastor Luther. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Wow. I'm all about that. There you go. Yeah. See, that's the thing about it. That's why there's no longer this inequality of service. They're using a lot of the same tires and getting the same service. Michelle? And you brought up a good point. Came across this past week. A lot of people don't understand that when it says a family plan, you don't all have to be under the same roof. The family plan, you can have, your son, your daughter, your brother or sister. You can get under that same plan. It's just that there's going to be one bill, but you don't have to be under the same roof. So that's a good point. Well, let me go on a couple other things I wanted to talk to you about today is life insurance. Now, next week we're going to talk about setting your house in order. There's a verse talking about the importance of having our house, our affairs in orders, and so life insurance kind of goes along with that. But I wanted to really touch on this and lay the foundation too. That what is the purpose of life insurance? A lot of people say, well, I got to have it when I die. Well, that's right. But ultimately, you have to understand the purpose of life insurance is income protection. What I mean by that is, well, since we keep on using Bill and Patty here, by the way, your house wasn't on fire last week, was it? Okay. I had to use them last week, just said that. But, God forbid something happens to Bill. Okay, Patty needs his income replaced, and so it's not enough for us gentlemen and men of the home to provide for our families while we're alive, but we should also be providing for them in the event that something were to happen to us. And so what happens is something happens to Bill, Patty needs his income replaced until she gets to that point where she can draw Social Security or her retirement benefits. So you look at that and, what is the income needs? And we'll talk about that. Her insurance needs are not as much now as it was when she had Crystal and BJ at home. And so that's why some people do this thing called decreasing term. You start up higher, and then it decreases the face amount over time as you get older. because ultimately we're trying to get people to the point of being self-insured. You know, what I mean self-insured is really so that they have the money set aside to either provide for their family or to provide for their funeral. And so insurance is something that is there to replace the income producer. It's not necessary once you come to the place of being self-insured. And I'm not saying you have to have millions of dollars. I'm just saying you have enough build up. You know, you're getting into the latter stages of your life where you don't have as much debt, you don't have as much need of income because the children are grown. You get to that point where you don't need as much or any insurance. Basically, there are really only two types of insurance, but you'll find multiple variations of these. Just by way of a little bit of background, you know, I used to have my own. I used to have my life insurance license. I sold Series 6 securities. Sold real estate. Had my realtor's license. So I have a little bit of knowledge of this, where I used to sell life insurance. And the biggest difference between term and whole life is what? What's the biggest difference? You can't borrow on it. That's true. Ken, were you going to say something?
Yeah, term is a short-term time, where it might be 5 years, where a whole life you could stretch out amongst your whole life. Once the term ends, then you got to start a new policy. Once the whole life, you don't have to do that. It just keeps going and going and going.
Right. And you know how it keeps on going and going? You know.
Because you keep paying into it.
Okay,
you
keep.
adding face value.
That's right. There's two components when you're dealing with whole life. There is a death benefit and there's a cash value. Okay? So every time you're making that monthly payment, it's called a premium, you're paying not only for the insurance coverage, but you're also paying into this cash value. You know, that's why it's so much more expensive for somebody older to get a policy than it is for somebody younger, because they're based upon mortality tables. You know, the fact of me dying is greater than Matt. Then again, y'all know, with your health, you know, and everything like that. Well, maybe it's not. But they look at the mortality tables. And so that's why it's cheaper when you're younger than, you know, now some people, I've had clients that had no insurance and they weren't self-insured and they're trying to get a policy when they're in their 60s or 70s. It's very cost prohibitive. But the thing that you've got to understand, and this is where the danger comes in, with whole life, you're paying for two things, but you only ever get one. You say, what are you talking about? Well, like I said, you're paying for the death benefit, okay? That's the insurance provision, but you're also putting money in this cash value. But if you die, what do you get? Do you get the insurance? You get the face amount. Do you get this cash value over here? No. You don't get both of those. Now, you say, well, I like it builds up with cash, and some people use whole life for an investment vehicle because especially back when we had the recession and the stock market crash in 2009, there was negative returns. People were looking at life insurance because the cash value had a guaranteed a guaranteed rate of return of 3%. Usually it's anywhere from 3, I think the most I've ever seen is 4% guaranteed. It will go up. And so people were getting involved in life insurance as an alternative to that. But you got to understand that you never get that unless you surrender the policy. If you surrender the policy, then what happens? The insurance is no longer around, okay? And so that's the reason why a lot of times, back when I was with the company I was, we would tell people buy term and invest the difference, because term insurance is the cheap insurance. It's like your auto coverage. You know, it's like your homeowners. Do you have a cash value in your auto policy? No. You're just paying for the risk that the insurance company looks. That's the term part of it. So that's why somebody, let's say, 40 years old, getting a policy, let's say for $250,000. Somebody that was his whole life would probably cost that person around $235 versus a term policy for that same $250,000, $250,000 would probably be around $50. You know, you say, well, that's a big difference. Well, that is a big difference because you're just buying the coverage. And especially for those that are young, have children, you need to have the insurance. You need to have your income replaced if something were to happen to you. You need to have term insurance. And you say, like Ken was referring to, and it's a good point, well, that's only for a certain term. You can buy 1-year policies, you can buy 5 years, you can buy 10 years. Actually, when I used to sell it, we used to do 20 years. That's the highest I've ever seen is 20 years. What they do is they'll take that 20 years, they'll take your mortality table, and they'll average it over that 20 years. So typically, if you just buy a term policy, you would maybe only be paying $20 in year number 1, and in year 20, you would be paying $50. They take that average and bring it down so that you're paying a flat amount over those 20 years. There's something else out there called universal life. The only difference between universal life and whole life is universal life takes that cash value and it invests in the stock market, invests in mutual funds, invests in something else. Whole life, usually that cash value is a guaranteed. It's based upon the dividends that that company pays, whether it be Northwest, Mutual, or some type of company like that. Does that make sense to everybody? So the key thing that you have to ask yourself is, what is the purpose of life insurance? You know, for people that are older, I usually say, hey, you don't, you know, especially if they're a widow or widower and they don't have a spouse, they don't have to have their income produced. They want to make sure that they have a burial fund. One of the things I tell people that are older in our estate planning is just create a burial fund. And what that is any bank could do this. It's called an irrevocable burial fund. You put aside there X amount of dollars for your burial, and it takes the place of insurance so that you're not paying these monthly premiums, because especially if you have a whole life. Now, I did get, when I was very young, because this is before I got involved in understanding this whole life versus term, I got a policy. It's called paid up at 65. So I got a whole life policy that when I turn 65, it's paid up. I don't have to pay anything more on that. But most whole life policies are based upon you paying it to age 100. That's how they keep that part down, is they take that and spread that over time. Make sense? Steve?
Question, didn't you say at one time, like, the burial insurance is good because they can't touch it, but then if the funeral home goes bankrupt, you lose that money?
That's why I say don't do a prepaid funeral. A lot of people, there's two different things. They're not mutually exclusive. There's a lot of people that clients come into me and say, hey, I already took care of with Latrobe here. I have a prepaid funeral. That's paying to Latrobe that. He does that. Any of them do. Hartman, Graziano, Fredericks, they all do that. What I'm talking about is a irrevocable burial fund. You put that money in with your bank. And I tell people that's the better way because of what you just said there. We had just 2 years ago down in Pittsburgh, there was a funeral home that went out of business. There was actually bodies that were down there that were not being taken care of because they just closed the doors one day. And so you don't know about that. And because we're a very transit society, why do I want to pay for a prepaid funeral here when I might be in Arizona or Florida or something like that, being buried somewhere else? So that's usually the reason why I tell people, don't do the prepaid funeral, do an irrevocable burial fund. Pat? Yeah, that depends upon your policy. If you have a policy that was only calculated out to 75, then at 75 you hit it, it can step up, absolutely. The biggest drawback from that is the fact that you're paying for two things, but you only ever get one. And And we can talk a little bit more about that next week. We're out of time here. I do have some information, especially for those that we were going to get into life insurance. What I will do for you is I'll provide this outline for those that are on Medicare. Our older people. Right now we are in that enrollment period. It goes from October to December 7th, okay? There is not, of course with Medicare, they pay up to 80% and they'll pay certain coverages. But you need a supplemental policy. There is over 150 products out there. There's no way in the world, unless you're an expert in this area, that you can do that. But you should look at that because there's some, they call them Medicaid advantages. Those are policies that there may not be any premium, but they work almost like an HMO, a health maintenance organization. They're cheaper, but they don't pay as much on coverage. So there is a name I can give to you of an advisor. He's total free of charge. He runs a nonprofit company out of Western Pennsylvania that will evaluate your situation, tell you which is the best type of Medicare supplemental policy that you would have. Try to get you some more information on that. The health insurance is the biggest area that we're still kind of up in the air. We're not sure what's going to happen here. Is Obamacare going to go away? Is it going to be modified? Is it going to be changed? But as it stands still here today, you need to have insurance. If you don't, under Obamacare, it's called you pay or you play or you pay. Either you play the game and get their insurance, or you actually have to pay an excess tax on your income tax return. That's why one of the questions that comes down to it, did you and your family have insurance throughout the year? If not, they can actually put an excise tax of $2,500 against you if you did not have that coverage. Next week, again, I'm going to try to tie this all together, setting your house in order, really talking about some things as far as wills, powers of attorney, what do I need, what's the purpose of those things, and setting our house in order not only financially, but legally and spiritually as well. Let's bow our heads in word of prayer. Lord, we do thank you again for your word. Lord, thank you for this time that we can talk very practically in ways to save money. Lord, thank you for entrusting to us. Help us never to forget that everything that we have is a gift from you. Lord, that you have entrusted these monies, these assets, these things for us to be used for your honor and glory. Lord, help us to understand that what we do with what you give to us is in turn our gift to you, our blessing to you. And Lord, help us to be good stewards of that which you've entrusted to us so we can stand before you one day and hear those words, well done, thy good and faithful servant. Lord, I pray that you be with the morning service now. May everything that's said and done in that service truly bring honor and glory to your name. For it's in Jesus' precious name we do pray.